In a kingdom nestled amidst rolling hills and verdant forests, there lived a wise and just king whose heart was heavy with grief. For his beloved wife, the queen, had passed away, leaving him to rule alone over their kingdom. The king mourned her loss deeply, his days filled with sorrow and longing for her gentle presence by his side. As the months passed and the king's grief showed no sign of abating, whispers began to spread throughout the kingdom of his despair. And so, in an attempt to lift his spirits, the king made a proclamation that echoed through the land. He would marry any maiden who could spin yarn of gold. News of the king's decree reached the ears of a poor woman and her daughter, who lived in a small cottage on the outskirts of the kingdom. The daughter, though kind-hearted and gentle, was plain in appearance, her features marred by a prominent scar that ran across her cheek. But despite her outward appearance, she possessed a kind and generous soul, and she longed to bring joy to the grieving king's heart. Determined to seize the opportunity to win the king's favor, the mother urged her daughter to attempt the impossible task. And so, with a heavy heart and trembling hands, the girl sat down at the spinning wheel and began to spin yarn of gold. Hours turned into days, and days into weeks, but no matter how hard she tried, the girl could not conjure gold from the simple thread. Frustrated and despairing, the girl sank to her knees, tears streaming down her cheeks as she cried out in anguish. And it was in that moment of desperation that the devil himself appeared before her, his eyes gleaming with mischief and malice. "What troubles you, my dear?" the devil asked, his voice smooth as silk. "Perhaps I can be of assistance." The girl looked up, her eyes wide with surprise, and told the devil of her plight. And with a wicked grin, the devil offered her a deal. He would spin yarn of gold for her, in exchange for her soul. At first, the girl hesitated, fear coursing through her veins at the thought of making a pact with the devil. But as the image of the grieving king's face flashed before her eyes, she knew what she had to do. With a trembling hand, she reached out and shook the devil's outstretched hand, sealing their bargain with a pact. True to his word, the devil spun yarn of gold for the girl, weaving it into the finest thread that the kingdom had ever seen. And when the king beheld the golden yarn, he was filled with wonder and awe, for he had never seen such a miraculous sight in all his days. In gratitude and admiration, the king took the girl as his bride, and they were married amidst great fanfare and celebration. The people rejoiced at the sight of their beloved king finding happiness once more, and the kingdom was filled with music and laughter as they danced in honor of the newlyweds. But as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, a shadow began to fall over the palace, casting a pall of unease over the once joyous atmosphere. For the devil had not forgotten his bargain with the girl, and as the year drew to a close, he returned to claim his prize. On the stroke of midnight, as the king and his bride lay entwined in each other's arms, the devil appeared before them, his eyes burning with an unholy fire. And with a triumphant smile, he declared that the time had come for the girl to fulfill her end of the bargain. The king, his heart heavy with sorrow, begged the devil to spare his beloved bride, offering anything and everything in exchange for her soul. But the devil only laughed, his laughter echoing through the halls of the palace like the tolling of a funeral bell. With tears streaming down her cheeks, the girl embraced her husband one last time, her heart breaking at the thought of leaving him behind. And as she faced the devil, her soul heavy with regret and fear, she knew that her sacrifice was the only way to save the man she loved. And so, as the devil claimed her soul and disappeared into the night, the king was left to mourn the loss of his beloved bride, his heart shattered into a million pieces by the cruel hand of fate. But even in his grief, he knew that their love would endure, for true love knows no bounds, not even those set by the devil himself. In a kingdom where sorrow and despair had cast a shadow over the land, there lived a king whose heart was heavy with grief. His beloved queen had passed away, leaving him to rule alone over their kingdom, and he mourned her loss deeply, his days filled with longing for her gentle presence by his side. But amidst the king's sorrow, a glimmer of hope appeared in the form of a proclamation. He would marry any maiden who could spin yarn of gold. News of the king's decree spread far and wide, reaching the ears of a poor woman and her daughter who lived in a small cottage on the outskirts of the kingdom. The daughter, though plain in appearance, possessed a kind and generous soul, and she longed to bring joy to the grieving king's heart. With her mother's encouragement, she attempted the impossible task, but despite her efforts, she could not spin gold from the simple thread. In her despair, the devil himself appeared before her, offering to spin yarn of gold in exchange for her soul. Though hesitant at first, the girl ultimately agreed, driven by her desire to bring happiness to the king. True to his word, the devil spun yarn of gold for the girl, and she was married to the king amidst great celebration. But as the year drew to a close, the devil returned to claim his prize, intent on taking the girl's soul. As the clock struck midnight, a small man-shaped figure, known as Dan the Dancer, appeared before the king and his bride, his eyes gleaming with malice. But the girl, quick-witted and clever, guessed Dan's name, preventing him from taking her away. In a panic, the girl revealed the truth to the king, who, filled with disbelief, tested her ability to spin gold yarn once more. Without the devil's help, however, the girl failed to spin gold yarn and turned into tar before their eyes. The king, heartbroken at the loss of his beloved bride, was left to mourn her passing. His kingdom plunged once more into darkness and despair. But even in his grief, he knew that their love would endure, for true love knows no bounds, not even those set by the devil himself. In the wake of the girl's transformation into tar and the departure of the devil, a somber silence settled over the kingdom. The once vibrant streets were now shrouded in a heavy mist of sorrow, and the king, burdened with the weight of his grief, retreated into the solitude of his chambers. As the days passed, whispers of the girl's fate echoed through the kingdom, mingling with tales of her bravery and sacrifice. Some spoke of her as a martyr, others as a cautionary tale of the dangers of dealing with the devil. But amidst the rumors and speculations, one thing remained clear. The king's heartache was felt by all who dwelled within his realm. In the quiet of his chambers, the king grappled with his grief, his mind plagued by memories of his beloved queen and the fleeting happiness he had found in the girl's presence. He wondered if he would ever know joy again, if the darkness that now enveloped his kingdom would ever be lifted. But even in his darkest moments, a glimmer of hope flickered within the king's heart. He remembered the strength and resilience of his people, their unwavering loyalty and steadfast determination to rebuild what had been lost. And as he looked out upon his kingdom, he knew that he could not let their suffering go unanswered. Summoning his advisors and counselors, the king sought counsel on how best to heal the wounds that had been inflicted upon their land. Together, they devised a plan to restore hope and prosperity to the kingdom, drawing upon the resilience and ingenuity of their people to forge a brighter future. In the days that followed, the kingdom began to stir once more, its people rallying together to rebuild what had been lost. Villages were reconstructed, fields were replanted, and the streets once again echoed with the laughter of children at play. But amidst the hustle and bustle of the kingdom's revival, the king remained haunted by the memory of his lost love. He visited her tomb each day, laying flowers at her feet and whispering words of longing into the wind. And yet, with each passing day, the weight of his grief began to lift, replaced by a newfound sense of purpose and determination. He knew that he could never forget his beloved queen, but he also knew that he could not let her memory overshadow the beauty and resilience of the kingdom she had left behind. And so, with his heart heavy yet hopeful, the king turned his gaze towards the horizon, his eyes alight with the promise of a brighter tomorrow. For though he had faced loss and sorrow, he had also found strength and resilience in the face of adversity. And as the sun set on the kingdom, casting its golden rays across the land, the king knew that no matter what trials lay ahead, he would face them with courage and grace, guided by the enduring legacy of love that had shaped his kingdom for generations to come.